Hey, good evening, and welcome. It is time again, once again, not just again, but once again. It is time once again for CU Immigration here on WRFU LP, Urbana, 104.5 FM. I will be your host for this evening. My name is Mr. Garza, and I'm already wanting to sneeze. But I'm here to tell you that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers. I'm a mess today. Maybe I should start over again. Nah, I'm not going to bother with it. Sorry. There's always something here that needs moving or pushing or doing or whatever. Okay. Always fun here at WRFU. Anyway, I am here to let you know that WRFU is an open forum for the Urbana Champaign community. Views expressed are those of the speakers and are not intended to represent WRFU, UCIMC, Urbana Socialist Forum, or as we like to say on the televised version of this show, UPTV. These views are our own, and by our in this instance, I mean myself. That's it. And or anyone whose article I may be reading. So if have not confused myself enough here with the beginning of the show, and you, in your watching and or listening thereof, I will begin to talk about stuff. So yeah, so here I am. It's hot out, in case you were wondering. It's like still in the 90s out there. But I was smart today. You know, some days I just like go for it. No matter what. It's just like I've got work to do. And so I work, and, you know, I end up being sorry that I did that. But today I did work all day, but I took a lot of breaks and drank a lot of fluids and cooled off in between. And I somehow managed to not get a headache, which is something that I always get in hot weather. It's just like, oh, it's hot, headache, hot, headache. It just, the two seem to go hand in hand. But I managed to avoid it by careful tending of the internal temp. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that tomorrow because I'll be sitting in a hot place all day and there's nowhere to go to cool off. But at least today I managed to do it. So I would pat myself on the back of my arms. Well, they sort of reach. No, they reached that far, but they don't really reach that far. Anyway, none of this has anything to do with immigration, but, you know, it is all part of the life, you know, just the exigencies, the idiosyncrasies. You know, it's just life. Stuff that goes on. Anyway, but back to immigration. Yeah, so you tune in here to listen to a show about immigration, not about me avoiding getting a headache in hot weather. And I don't blame you, because of the two, I would rather listen to a show about immigration myself. But being self-centered as I am, I can't help but talk about my success at avoiding getting a headache, because I don't like headaches. I don't know about you, but I'm not a fan of them. Anyway, be that as it may. So, information, right? That's what you tune into the show to acquire. There's information out there. And really, if you think about it, there's information everywhere. You can hardly turn around for bumping into information around here these days. That was not the case at one time. You had to wait for the daily newspaper before you had any idea what was going on. And then you only knew what was going on, you know, what they told you was going on. And you only knew what they said about it, and or anything someone else told you who may have actually seen or experienced it. So yeah, I mean, it's really, things have changed a lot. And now you really actually kind of have to try to avoid knowing something about what's going on. The problem is that with this profusion of information comes a lot of misinformation, or sort of semi-correct, semi-incorrect information there's a lot of garbage in there, and a lot of it is garbled, and a lot of it is twisted in a way to make you feel something or to think something about a certain thing. So I've been noticing a few stories in particular lately that are, you know, pretty intense, and so I've been noticing the different reporting on them and thinking, okay, wait a minute, that's sort of weird. Is that really true? And then digging a little deeper and going, oh, okay, not really, or sort of, or kind of, or whatever. So one of the things I'm sure you've been hearing a lot about is children at the border. So what's been going on there? If you remember a while back, there was Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced a new policy where they are going to criminally prosecute people attempting to cross the border. Now, this is a difference. This is not how they used to do it, except in some cases. But now, even if you come here, like, say, seeking sanctuary, you're going to be criminally prosecuted as an illegal border crossing, as someone trying to cross the border illegally. That is a big difference, and it has far-reaching effects. So let me read this story to you here. I forgot, I didn't write down where it came from. Anyway, it's a story from somewhere. President Donald Trump on Sunday blamed Democrats for his own administration's policy of separating undocumented immigrant children from their parents when they are arrested at the border. Put pressure on the Democrats to end the horrible law that separates children from their parents once they cross the border into the U.S. Catch and release, lottery and chain must also go with it, and we must continue building the wall. Democrats are protecting MS-13 thugs. This is a tweet from Trump. So I guess we should try to unpack this tweet a little bit because it's compact. So Trump is suggesting, he says, put pressure on the Democrats to end the horrible law that separates children from their parents once they cross the border into the U.S. Okay, that's the first thing. He's claiming that Democrats are not cooperating in an effort to undo some imaginary law, some law that separates children, that forces the government to separate children from their parents once they cross the border. Then he says catch and release, lottery and chain must also go with it. So here's where it starts to get sneaky. Catch and release was a description of a policy where they would catch people, take their information, catch people who cross the border illegally once they had come across, not as they were crossing. So when you're caught as you're crossing, they basically just turn you around and send you right back. But if you're already across, you know, and they catch you somewhere else, a lot of times they would just take your information, let you go, and give you a court date where you're supposed to show up. That's what he's talking about with catch and release. Lottery and chain must also go with it. That's talking about the visa lottery. So when there are leftover openings after, you know, some of the various brackets have been filled, there was a lottery for people. So they had certain specific quotas, like you could have so many people on this visa, so many people on that kind of visa, so many people on this kind of visa from certain countries. And then there would often be leftover slots. So there weren't enough of people applying for the H-1 visa, so that some of those would go unfulfilled. That's where the visa lottery came in, and they would just sort of say, okay, we've got 16 openings, you know, here's a list of names. You know, we'll just pick them at random and you get to come in. So that's what he's talking about there. And chain, they're talking about chain migration, which is basically otherwise known as family migration. So let's say you come over to this country and you would like to sponsor your parents or your children or your grandchildren or your cousins or somebody else. That's what chain migration is. So what he's basically saying here, there's a lot packed into this. It's full of all sorts of misleading and really creepy stuff here. So what he's trying to imply is that Democrats will not work with him to end this quote-unquote law that separates children from their parents once they cross the border. And he's saying, asking people to put pressure on Democrats to come to the bargaining table, basically. And he wants to include ending catch and release lottery and chain migration, visa lottery and chain migration into it. And we must continue building the wall. Well, that's misleading too, because we're not building the wall. We never built the wall. We have fencing here and there. And then on top of that, he says Democrats are protecting MS-13 thugs. The whole thing is just misdirection, misleading, and outright lies. So anyway, thought I'd unpack that. So this is where we get into the, what is going on here, because we, on one hand, we know when we hear something from Trump that to be suspicious of virtually every aspect of it. I mean, the minute he opens his mouth or tweeter or whatever it is, that you have to go, okay, wait a minute. Let me consider what you are saying, because it is most likely completely untrue, partially untrue, or extremely misleading. And this little tweet here continues all that stuff. So what are the facts here? So in fact, it was Attorney General Jeff Sessions who flagged the policy in a speech earlier this month when he pledged to criminally prosecute as many illegal border crossing cases as humanly possible. Quote, if you're smuggling a child, then we will prosecute you, and that child will be separated from you as required by law, Sessions said. If you don't like that, then don't smuggle children over our border. Okay, let's stop for another second. I mean, you literally have to stop every other word that these people say and unpack it. So if you're traveling with your children, you are not smuggling children, right? You're smuggling children if you are like a human trafficker. Coyote is what they often call them. And let's say you've got a van full of kids. Yeah, you're smuggling children. But if you're bringing your own children, you're not smuggling children. But he is intending to prosecute you as a child smuggler, basically, a child trafficker. And naturally, given that, if you're a child trafficker, you will have the child separated from you. So that's like, again, that's extremely misleading and basically twisting things as far as you can possibly twist them. Anyway, okay, moving on. We've got even more crap like this. Okay, so Homeland Security Secretary Christian Nielsen used similar language in congressional testimony a week later. Quote, our policy is if you break the law, we will prosecute you, Nielsen said. You have an option to go to a port of entry and not illegally cross into our country, end quote. By prosecuting undocumented immigrants criminally, rather than processing their cases through civil immigration courts, the Trump administration has ensured that the many children of such criminally charged migrants would technically become unaccompanied minors and would be put in the care of the Department of Health and Human Services. Boy, I can't talk. Would be put in the care. Okay, sorry. My mouth is not working today. I probably should have spoken more before now. I'm speaking for the first time today, I think. I don't think I've actually said anything yet. Anyway, so the announced change to formal policy came after months of examples of migrant families being separated. HHS admitted last month that nearly 1,500 unaccompanied minors were unable to be accounted for during a recent survey. And a recent report from the ACLU and University of Chicago Law School's International Human Rights Clinic, the result of years of litigation over a request for government documents, detailed hundreds of cases of alleged physical and emotional abuse made by unaccompanied minors during the Obama administration against U.S. Customs and Border Protection. CBP called the report claims unfounded and baseless. Okay, even in that, there needs to be unpacked, because this is somebody making a statement about this stuff, but they're massaging things and putting them together in a strange way. So, 50 unaccompanied minors were unable to be accounted for. That is a completely different thing than what we're talking about above. This is something from the past that has happened. And yeah, that is a completely different thing. And we'll get into all this later, but they're kind of like mushing it all together and making it seem like the same thing. So, in May, the Trump administration announced a new policy. It would refer for criminal prosecution 100% of illegal southwest border crossings. The Secretary of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen, signed a memo that directs the department to refer all suspected border crossers to the Justice Department. So this is what the Trump administration has decided to do. They're making a conscious decision to do this, knowing what this will do with children, which we get to next. The new policy means that parents who arrive at the border with their children will be sent to criminal detention facilities. Children cannot be sent to those facilities and therefore are sent to separate detention facilities and are deemed unaccompanied minors. Now, this is a complete twisting of unaccompanied minors and who they are and what they came here for and everything about it. This is creating unaccompanied minors out of children who came with their parents. Quote, "We don't want to separate families, but we don't want families to come to the border illegally. That's just the way the world works," Jeff Sessions said. "I didn't want to shoot the hostages, but you refused to accept my demand, so that's just how it goes." Would be another way of saying that exact same thing. So prior to the new policy, most families that arrived at the border were dealt with through a civil removal process. This kept families together. Donald Trump, responding to criticism of his own policy, blamed it on a horrible law that was kept in place by Democrats. Put pressure on the Democrats, blah, blah, blah. So we saw that. So this is not true. There is no law that requires the Trump administration to separate families. Children as young as 1 year old are being separated from their families as a result of this new discretionary Trump administration policy. But when CBS's Margaret Brennan was interviewing influential House Republican Mark Meadows about the issue on Sunday, she accepted Trump's tweet as if it was a fact. Brennan, quote, "I want to ask you as well about immigration because we could talk all day about the other topic. The president tweeted yesterday that it's a horrible law to have parents separated from their children if they cross the border illegally. Do you agree it's horrible?" Representative Meadows, quote, "Yeah, I think it's a horrible law. It's one of those that actually, Brennan, do you want to change it?" At no point did Brennan mention that there is no law that requires the Trump administration to separate families. So Meadows perpetuated the misinformation further by stating that there is a real bipartisan support for changing the law, which does not exist. CBS made the situation worse on Monday by posting an article about the interview, which refers to current federal law that compels the separation of immigrant children from their families crossing the U.S. border. So, where do we begin on this? It's really, so you're seeing, though, as I'm reading this, you're understanding that this is how people play with facts and confuse other people into believing them or who don't know any better or who aren't really sure. So by playing with this fact, by treating border crossing families as criminals, by criminalizing, once again, criminalizing immigration, they are creating a situation where they have to separate children because they simply can't send children to the same kinds of jails. I mean, we have laws about that. So yes, there is a law that you can't send children to, prison. They go to juvenile detention facilities. We don't want to change that law. There is no law that we want to change here. This is a policy that should be changed, absolutely should be changed, but it is completely a policy of, for, and by the Trump administration. And they're doing it knowingly. They know what they're doing. They're using this as a tool to mislead and confuse people so that people will think, oh, this is horrible. We need to do something about this. The Democrats need to stop stalling and get together and work on something so that we can fix this horrible situation. But that is not the case. That is absolutely not the case. So we have to be very clear about what is happening here. This is a Republican, a Trump administration policy, a change in policy, a change in the way they go about dealing with border crossing. And because of that, this side effect, which they knew was going to happen, and they're doing it because they want this side effect to happen so that they can then twist things in a way that makes it seem terrible. So here's another article on this. This is from the Washington Post, entitled, "The Trump Administration's Immigration Policies Are Impossibly Cruel." That's the whole point. Amid growing outrage over the Trump administration's policy of separating children from their parents when families arrive at the border, many are asking how the administration can be so cruel as to literally tear children from their mother's arms. There's a clear answer, one that runs through all of the administration's policies on immigration. The cruelty is the whole point. It's both a reflection of President Trump's beliefs and those of his key advisors on immigration, and a practical tool they are using to reduce the number of immigrants coming to the United States. There won't be a more humane set of policies coming out of this administration because they have no interest in being humane. Back in December, the Post reported that the administration was considering a set of policy changes that would both separate families arriving at the border and crack down on undocumented parents already in the United States who send for their children. Then earlier this month, Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced that everyone who crosses the border illegally will be subject to criminal prosecution. And because children cannot be held in adult jails, that means families will be split up. Previously, families were held in facilities where they could remain together. The implementation of this policy has led to agonizing scenes at the border of anguished parents and terrified children. Quote, "This is as bad a practice as I've seen in my career," one American Civil Liberties Union lawyer told NBC News. "It has such a cruel feel to it. In some cases, families have been separated even when they arrived at official ports of entry and requested asylum." The Trump administration has made no attempt to hide the fact that they hope that the harshness of this policy will deter people from seeking to come to the United States. "If you don't want your child separated, then don't bring them across the border illegally," said Sessions. "It's not our fault that somebody does that." Refer once again to my hostage comparison. It's not my fault that I had to shoot the hostage. You didn't accede to my demands. Therefore, blame yourself. All right. As White House Chief of Staff John F. Kelly put it with his characteristic compassion, quote, "The children will be taken care of, put into foster care or whatever." The "or whatever" turns out to potentially include internment camps on military bases. The idea of using harsh policies as a deterrent to illegal immigration has been part of the Republican approach for some time. You may remember that in 2012, Mitt Romney proposed self-deportation as a solution to the problem, the idea being that if you made life miserable and terrifying enough for undocumented immigrants, they'd leave. Believe it or not, at the time he was intensely criticized for the remark. When he ran for president, Trump not only proposed a set of policies to make America less welcoming of immigrants, a wall on the southern border, a ban on Muslims coming to the United States, he also used rhetoric far harsher than other Republicans had been willing to in the past or even at the time. Others would say that they only opposed illegal immigration, but not legal immigration, and would pay lip service to the idea that we're a nation of immigrants. In contrast, Trump began his campaign calling Mexican immigrants criminals and rapists, propagated racial stereotypes, and essentially told Republican voters that they no longer needed to pretend to believe that immigration is a good thing for America. The Republican base loved it. Indeed, there may be no single factor more responsible for Trump winning the GOP nomination than his harsh rhetoric and stances on immigration. And unlike the position he takes on some issues, it's obvious that Trump sincerely dislikes the very idea of immigration, or at least immigration from countries that are not majority white. He has surrounded himself with a group of advisors who share the beliefs not only that illegal immigration must be stopped, but that legal immigration should be curtailed as well. Excuse me. These ideas have been turned into policy. The Trump administration has, among other things, done the following: capped the number of refugees the United States accepts at 45,000, the lowest number since the refugee program was created in 1980. The actual number accepted this year could be only half that. Rescinded the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program. Rescinded the Deferred Action for Parents of Americans and Lawful Permanent Residence program. Barred entry from certain Muslim-majority countries. Ended temporary protected status for immigrants from Honduras, El Salvador, Haiti, Nepal, Sudan, and Nicaragua, forcing people who have lived legally in the United States for years or even decades to return to the countries of their birth. As the Migration Policy Institute concluded, no administration in modern U.S. history has placed such a high priority on immigration policy or had an almost exclusive focus on restricting flows, legal and unauthorized alike, and further maximizing enforcement. They even changed the mission statement of U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services so it would no longer refer to the United States as a nation of immigrants. So when you hear horrifying stories from the border of families being ripped apart, understand that the administration is perfectly happy for those stories to be told. They have no compassion for the human beings involved, and they want others who might consider coming to the United States to know how heartlessly they'll be treated. It's the whole point. That pretty much sums it up right there. And it's useful to think about it that way and to understand how truth, facts, information is being played with here, so that you'll be misled and you will misunderstand what's actually going on. So, with that being said, the current administration, are not the only people, yeah, they're people, they're not people, they're people, are not the only people who are doing this. Actually, on the other side of the issue, we have a big thing going on right now. I'm so sorry, excuse me. Cough, 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 choke, choke, choke. About missing immigrant children. And this is a little more difficult to get into because it's tricky.